Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Experience Kills. I am your host today, Ben, and with me, as always, my partner in crime, and someone I've just shockingly found out is a fan of manga, Richard.
An erstwhile fan. I've not watched any anime or read any manga for absolutely years. But yeah, I'm still guilty of that. It's still like it. It's like the old Gary Glitter tunes, you know. You can't stop liking them just because.
I think in that case, yes, you absolutely can. There's a couple of bands that I come to mind where it's like, nope, can't listen to that anymore. They're terrible. Retroactively, I'm not even going to mention them. But let's mention why we are here today and why Richard's, I'm going to call it a fetish for manga is important. Is because I've been checking out this new app on the Nintendo Switch called Izneo, which is a comic book reading app. Weirdly, already the second comic book reading app available on the Nintendo Switch, even though there's no proper video streaming app.
No Netflix.
What's that about? How is that not on there?
Weird.
So strange. But, you know, we do, however, have comic book choices. And immediately to me, Izneo stands out against its competition, InkyPen, because I looked at InkyPen today to try and compare it, and I had to, subscribe to a $5.99 a month service just to look at the library. I had to pay prior to even seeing what they had on offer. So I was like, do you know what? Not going to do that. I'm gonna just stick with Izneo going forwards. And Izneo is kind of cool. Izneo is this small app, I would say, if you compare it to the big giants on iOS like Comixology, because it's this small French-based company. So there's lots of independent and European comics, in English obviously, translated on the app. As well as some sort of mid-tier publishers like Dark Horse, IDW, Titan, things like that. So it does offer a subscription model, which doesn't cover all the titles, but does, I think, cover over 1,000 comics, and you can pay, I think it's $7.99 a month for that. Or you can just buy comics in single issue form sometimes, or as graphic novels, from what I can tell, pretty reasonable pricing points. Richard, you just had a little play around on there as well. What are your initial impressions of the offering? Anything you recognise?
Yeah, well, I've just found the erotic section, which has a reasonable selection of erotic comics. Some old favourites in there. Yep, that's the exact use that Nintendo envisaged for the Switch.
Brilliant. I'm so glad you gravitated towards that immediately. Let me point out that it's sort of my other life. I work in a job, we'll say, very closely related to comic books in many, many ways. So I'm a big comic book fan myself and have been for many, many years. So when I got in touch with the guys at Izneo to check out their app, I was quite excited to look into it and to see what the offering was going to be like, especially from this smaller outfit as they are. And you know what? I was pleasantly surprised. There were some real titles on there that I've read over the years that I'm a big fan of. Things like 13, which there was a video game based of. Fear Agent, which is an early Rick Remender comic book who's gone on to big things for Image and Marvel, and is probably my favourite of his offerings. Black Sad, which is an absolutely amazing crime noir Spanish comic book with the most beautiful artwork, which I highly recommend people checking out. But also things like EVE Online's comic books. So lots of video game tie-in options there. They've even got a few video game art books on there. I noticed the Deus Ex one. I noticed the Ratchet and Clank art book was on there. And then there's loads of comics you just probably never heard of, which you can just get into and investigate. Things like there's a Forever War adaptation of the novel by Joe Haldeman, which is an absolute classic. There's a comic book of that, which I believe was originally a French comic adapted into English. And then there's a few others. I've just started reading Bunker, which is a comic I've never heard of before, but I'm really enjoying. It's got a World War II fantasy epic thing going on in there. So yeah, it's a really diverse, wide selection. You know, everything from Dark Horse's offering of things like Aliens and Predators, all the way through to obscure Euro comics that you've maybe never even heard of. And you know, it's a really good selection from what I can tell. And like you said, Richard, you know, like we mentioned with your fetish, a decent selection of manga as well, which you don't always see on these services.
Not as much as I'd like, but this is coming from someone who used to read a fair bit of it a few years ago. It doesn't have a lot on there that I haven't seen, or that I'd be interested to see, to be honest. So this is quite a new service, did you say?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, they do have an iOS app. It has been around for a little while on mobile and iPads because of that. And there are some differences which we'll talk about shortly between the apps. But yeah, it's relatively new. And I think it's interesting because it's coming from this Euro standpoint. And at this point, the Marvel and the DC, the big boys in comic books, are tied up within their own apps. You're just not going to see a lot of their stuff coming into these independent app sort of services, which is a shame in a way. But it'd be great to see if they can broaden their selection a little bit, I think, on Izneo. But yeah, they're building the catalogue right now. I'm
just looking for the classics like Akira, Ghost in the Shell, stuff like that, but it's not on there at the minute. It does have Appleseed, favourite of mine, but yeah, hope they bolster that in future and make it a bit more of a broad offering within the manga category at least. But it does have quite a lot of comics outside of that genre, so
there is a great deal in there. There's thousands and thousands of comics. I spent a large portion of the weekend digging through their catalogue and looking at everything that was there on offer. And I'm obviously familiar with quite a lot of it, but there are stuff in there I hadn't seen before. And that's what's kind of interesting to me about the Euro side of stuff. People often don't sort of know about how strong and important and influential the European comic book scene is. The French, the Spanish, the German comics, because a lot of them, until recently, were never translated into English. And their market was almost entirely separate to the American comics, Marvel and DC. And, what we weirdly get in the West are the British voiced and acted films that are adapted from these Euro comics. Like recently, we got Valeria. Did you see that one? That Dane, what's his name, and Carla Delevingne. That was a Euro comic. Snowpiercer, Chris Evans movie from a few years back. That was a Euro comic.
Mate, I watched Snowpiercer last week.
Oh, only just seen it. It's amazing, isn't it?
It's awesome. Yeah, really enjoyed that film.
Really, really good film. And guess what? The comic is also fantastic. So there's a lot of stuff from those European territories that you don't know about, you don't realise until you maybe get on a service like this and start digging through and then discovering these awesome comic books. And especially artists. Like Jodorowsky comes from European as well. He's French, and he's obviously famous for the Inkle. The Inkle is all on there as well. Great quality, trippy, very, very strange sci-fi, as is, Mobius's work on those as well. Fantastic stuff. I'm getting into the weeds a little bit here with my comic book references, I suppose. But I get excited about comics. It's my other big passion. So to video games. So yeah, it's a cool service. So I mean, let's talk about the reading. It's a bit weird reading the comics on the Nintendo Switch in undocked mode, in handheld mode, because it doesn't utilize the touchscreen, which when you're used to reading comics in other services on other touchscreen devices, you have an understanding of the language that they use, as it were, the way they control. So I had to kind of relearn how to read these comics in using the buttons, using the analog thumbsticks or the D-pad, and using the face buttons on the Switch itself. It's a bit strange, but it took some getting used to. It
does feel wrong. It's so weird because I'm coming from someone who's tried to read comics on like a Kobo device, an ebook device. Even touchscreen function exists there, for navigating comics and the comic store, but not on a Switch. It seems like a weird omission.
The app seems quite early right now. It feels like it's way behind where the iOS version is. For example, the way in which you manage your library on the iOS version, there's lots of granular options for sorting it, for looking at, purchasing date by authors, by titles and all that. None of that seems to be present on the Switch. You just have a list and it's just sorted by what you last downloaded. So it's not great for keeping track of what your actual titles are. Same with the unpurchased title, or the ones that are in your library you haven't downloaded yet but have purchased. So just trying to find them and get them downloaded, it's not the most intuitive experience on the Switch at the moment, but obviously it's going to be iterated upon, it's going to be developed as a platform, I would hope, because it's not the best at the moment. What I did enjoy, however, was reading comics in docked mode on my big TV, which I didn't think I'd enjoy. But it was actually really cool because I was able to just sit back, and the art looks really nice and it's high resolution, the scans, and it looks really good on a big screen. And you can zoom in and stuff. So the ways you read the comics is some of them have this kind of the panel by panel comic book method of reading supported, like you might be familiar with from other platforms, but it's not their entire library. It's like there's something they're using called Easy Comics, and it doesn't go across all of them. It seems to mostly be on the Euro stuff, and it's not so much on the Western stuff, things from the back catalogue that maybe they've just got from, say, other publishers on Quick and stuff like that. So the Titan stuff, the IDW stuff, the Dark Horse stuff, none of that seems to have the Easy Comics supported reading method, which is a bit of a shame, because all that means you have to do is you have to zoom in on a page basically and then scroll up and down it, which doesn't give the best reading experience. No. I think the panel by panel reading is quite good, or being able to read a whole page at once works quite well, but that doesn't work on the tiny Switch screen, especially in handheld mode.
No, that sounds like a bit of a faff. I've had experience of other apps like this. I've used Comixology a fair bit, and their system of, again, it's not on every comic, but the ones where it works, it's really good. It's just a button press or a quick flick, and it will focus on the next element or the next box of the comic, and sort of zoom in on key bits to accentuate the action, and it almost feels like animated in a way. That's a really good way to read comics. So
and that is supported, and from what I can see from looking through the library and the comics I've been checking out, about 25% of the comics, maybe a little bit more, have that Easy Comics viewing method at the moment. Again, it's something I'm hoping that they will continue to roll out across their catalogue. So just to surmise, I'd say this is definitely the best comic reading option on the Nintendo Switch right now, because you have a subscription option and you have an a la carte option. Prices seem very competitive, and actually very reasonable across most of the library. It's got a really wide selection of comics you might not know about and maybe would never even come across on another service, which I think is a real plus. But the app needs some work, and I think the readability of the comics themselves could do a little bit of work. But you can go onto the Switch right now, download the app for free. There are some free comics on there that you can just check out and have a look at to see how you feel about it all. So there's really no reason not to give it a go.
And it's not limited to Switch either, is it? So if you wanted to buy your comics on Switch and then take them to your phone or tablet, then you can do that too.
Yeah, it's all shared across the one account that you set up, which is nicely done as well. So I think that brings us to the end of another episode of Experience Kills. Please like and subscribe on the YouTube channel, and just so you guys are aware, we are available in audio-only formats on Spotify and iTunes and on our direct RSS feed. And by all means, please subscribe. I don't know if you can subscribe to Twitter, but you can like us on Twitter and send us some feedback about this video, about any video, about anything on our channel, or maybe just to say hi. I'm cool with any of that. You can also find me on my personal Twitter account at DIYE. Richard, where can they find you?
I'm at Colonel Red on Twitter.
Colonel Red, sir. He is indeed. And I think that's another one in the bag. Go read some comics. Comics are awesome. Yeah, that's what I'm going to leave this with.
And the rude ones especially, please.
Bye.
Bye.